Hello YouTube, my name's Sean Connors and welcome back to Outsiders, and this week we're going to be covering off show number 4 in the series, and well, we've got quite a lot of ground to cover, so without further ado let's get straight into it. I just want to point out at the beginning tonight, I've got a viewer's question that, and this particular person doesn't want to be named, and I understand it, but they've been with me a long time as a subscriber, and they've got a fantastic question that ties in beautifully. It's always coincidence in life is a brilliant thing. Ties in beautifully with the random review this week. So let you know what the random review is going to be, and the question, I won't tell you the question, but it's linked in with the original Dungeons & Dragons Advanced Player's Handbook. In fact, the whole thing really. I'm quite excited to do a mini review on this, but it's not going to be a hugely massive review in any stretch of the imagination. It's just going to be my real love of the game, if I'm being honest. So anyway, that's to come. So let's start off with a couple of products that have gone live this week here in the UK. Now, the first product I'm going to touch on is behind me here. You won't be able to see it, I'm afraid, but it's called How to Host a Dungeon. And the idea behind this product, it's very cheap, it's about £11 UK money, so I suppose it's about $15. It's all about building a dungeon from its creation, all the way through who's in it, why they're there, the whole ecology of the thing, which I absolutely love. And it's meant to be a solo thing, but at the end they quite clearly say, well actually, you know what, you can take your creation and then obviously run it in a fancy game, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I think that's a really, really good idea. I really hope at some point very soon to actually have that product, and I'd love to do a dungeon. I hope somebody else out there does as well, and links their video dungeon to that, because I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. In fact, actually, even if people don't do that, what I might well do is, do you know, it's got me thinking right live on the video actually, that I think what I might do is, I've got a really good idea that's just come to me, that I think what we might do is do I'll have to come back with a separate video on this, but what if we had a video competition around creating a community. Everybody did a community dungeon, and they did their own video. We come up with a platform and a formula for it. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Leave that thought there and let me think about it, because I'm going to probably come back with something later this week on a video on this, because I think that'd be really interesting. So that's just something that struck me live on air. So the two products this week. You've seen the first. The second one I have to go to, but it's not something I would normally look at. And it's this one here, and it's called Abney Park's Airship Pirates RPG. Now it's about £34 in the UK. I suppose that's about 50-ish dollars. And it's all about Earth in the future. There's been a great apocalypse back in 1900s. It's sort of steampunk style game. You've got North America as a wilderness. You've got smog shrouded cities. You've got these floating pirate airships that can literally tap into the timeline of history and more. It just sounds like a really exciting idea for a game. Love the idea behind it. Certainly this company, Cubicle 7, who've been developing this, and they've certainly caught my attention because they seem to be producing some very interesting ideas for RPG games. Now, I wouldn't normally look at something like this personally, but yeah, it's got me interested. I love the idea of the pirate stuff, and anything that's going to tap into history has got to be a bit of fun. So it's got a lot of interesting elements to it, and I'd really be fascinated if anybody does any review on that product. Link it to this, fire a comment, and let's see your review. It'd be very exciting to see that, and can't wait, to be honest. So that brings me to the next part of my programme tonight. We're going to talk about some tips. Now, the first tip I want to share with you is a personal one. Now, this is one of those tips that I'm really hoping that people can really understand. And when I was racking my brain out this week about what am I going to do this week for a tip for you guys and girls out there, what was going to be the tip for DMing this week. I mean, I've got lots of ideas on my tips, and I wrote loads of them ahead of where we are. But as the programme's developed and as the show format started up, I've had to change it a little about exactly what I want to run when I want to do it for tips. And this one is one of those that I would normally do later, but I just feel the audience is definitely, from the early days of the audience I had to where we are now, it's a much more, if I may use the word, a much more mature bunch, much more intelligent bunch in terms of thought processes, what you believe, the way you communicate, your emails, your letters, your comments. Fantastic. And I welcome every single one of you. I want to see more video responses when you have time. Those will always make the difference. The more people we get in the community joining together on a particular video, the better it will be. And as I said before in the previous show, if you've got something, if you've done a video and you think, Sean, I need a response from you, let me know what video you've done, and I will have a good think about it, and I will definitely, if time permits, do a video response for you on my views, etc. So, this week's tip, coming back to it, is all about personal DMing motivation. Often people have said in the games I've run for quite a while now, you're always motivated, you're always on top of your game, you seem to be really right up there every time. You seem to have I suppose you would call it an air of confidence about you. You know exactly what you're doing. Is that because of your knowledge of the rules? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? Somewhat, I suppose. But there's a much bigger thing that goes into this. It's personal motivation. It's one thing that has been a big part of me. It's my keystone, really, about who I am right now in my view, and what I do in my games. Before I go into every game, the final thing that I always do, literally the final walk in, before I meet anybody, the little, walk up the steps before the game, before I enter the club, before I do anything, the final thing I do is my own little DM's motivation thing, and it's simply this. I say these words to myself every time. What if? What if? What if? What if this was the last session I ever ran? What if this was my final campaign? What if? There's no greater motivation to me than that. Because I want to make sure that session, that campaign we're doing, is the best that I can make it. I want to make it as entertaining, I want to leave as long a lasting memory on every single player that sat around that table, if I can. I want to try and touch every single player in that way, so that when they think back in years to come, there's that smile, that memory that they have, that they had a great time, and I want people to look back and say he was a great ref. That's always been my goal, is to be regarded as a great DM. Now, I don't know if that's your goal, I don't know if that's your motivation when you DM, but it's been mine, and I've only come to realise this in the last few years. I've always set my bar high, but that's fine. But it's setting the motivation, the right frame of mind. And it definitely, when people talk about positive mental attitude and those types of things, this really sets it, because it really puts everything into perspective. Because in life you don't know. Yeah, you don't know what's out there. You don't know what's around the corner. So you've got to be pragmatic, realistic. You've got to do these sort of things if you want to really elevate yourself. And for me, this is really giving something away of myself personally to you as my subscribers, and it's something that I would always stand by as one of the gold nuggets personally for me. Now, I say that a lot of times, I know, but I really genuinely believe this to be a very good one. So that's why I share it with you tonight as my big tip of the week. Now, I have some others I want to share, and I'm going to touch on one of them now, which is about, very simply, it's about basically player motivation. Now, I'm not going to cover this off in too much detail here, but we've said it before, that as a DM, one of your tools, one of your jobs, is to really understand the players around your table. And that means talking to them, and that means listening to them, and that means really digging, not just about them turning up at your table, just coming every week and going every week and going. Fine, great. Is your game staying the same? Are they improving? Are your players' motivations, are they changing and you're not aware of it? If you don't communicate with your players, you can't possibly find out, really deep down, what it is that brings them there every week, what it is that they love, what it is that they want out of that campaign, that character, that session. Those are really important things if you want to really take the game up another notch for yourself personally and get them interested in what you're doing. So I share that with you to think about, really, more than being a specific tip, but it's important. It's listening and talking beyond what you do in the game that really get it to another level. So I thought I'd share that with you. Now, another thing that I think is important tonight and to cover off is ground rules. Now, we don't often, as a tip here, I don't think I've covered this off well enough in the past, and that's simply this. When you set your campaigns up for the first time, I think one of the big keys, particularly as you get more experienced, is to set the ground rules. If you're using a particular campaign, well, no, not a campaign, but if you're using a particular rule set, let's call it Pathfinder because it's easy to use right now, that's the rule set you're going to use. Are there any changes you're making to it? The players need to know. Are there any differences in anything that you want your players to be aware of? And I would always stress that really clearly, because if you set those ground rules early, the players are under no illusions as to the type of game they're going to face. Now, I do it myself every time I do a campaign. There's no bartering. It's not, for me, it's not a social contract. Some people have used that word a lot in some of the videos I've seen recently about players and the DM socially contracting how the game's going to flow and all that. I don't. I tell players, this is what we're running, this is how I'm going to run it, and this is the type of game it is. If that's for you, fantastic. I guarantee you one thing, you're going to be mentally challenged, it's going to be very difficult, and above all else, you come through this, I guarantee it's going to improve you. I honestly believe that you'll come out of it feeling great, and you'll feel privileged that we all hook together, that everybody, what you give to me, you get back in spades. And that's something that I'm particularly proud of for the players. I love interacting with the players, and I love to give, if they give me something to feed off, I guarantee I'll give it back in absolute spades, in tons. I will give them back more than they give me. But that's my job as a DM, is to do that. So it's about understanding those ground rules, really, why you're doing them. And one of the big things about ground rules, or house rules really in general, is I always think of it this way. If your rule, who's it going to hurt most? That's the big thing to think about. Who's it going to hurt most? Is it going to hurt the players or the NPCs the most? Sometimes it's easy to think, well, actually, it doesn't make any difference because they both suffer the same way. But that's not quite true, because you've got to weigh up that the NPCs are cast-offs, they're one-offs most of the time, they rarely come back, they face the players the once. So you have to really look at it, that any fundamental changes you make may have a bigger impact on the players over the course of the campaign than the NPCs. So you must weigh those types of things up before you commit to those types of changes. And as long as the changes you make are fair, you remember them and you use them all the time, and because of the way you've set the campaign up, because of your ground rules, everybody knows where they stand and they know what type of game they're getting involved in. So again, it saves time. If players, it's not their cup of tea, they want to drop out, or there are issues, then it's a great way to get those issues out of the way very quickly before the game unfolds. So there are my tips tonight. A few to share with you. I hope they've been of some benefit, and we can now move on to the next stage of this. The viewer's question tonight. I'm going to change up the order slightly because I want to come to the review last. My viewer's question was a great one. He said to me, I'm playing Pathfinder, and I had some thoughts as a DM about something I wanted to try out. I want to know your thoughts. If I took the original Player's Handbook, Experience Points tables, and subbed those in for most of the classes that exist in Pathfinder, obviously with some changes, could it work? My instinctive first thoughts were no, because I thought, well, there's a very fine balancing act that they put in the game, and I suppose, like a lot of things at the moment, we can easily get preoccupied with the word balance and what it really means to us personally. I suppose that's an open-ended question. That could mean anything to anybody. But I could see where he was going. When I opened the book up and started looking at the tables, a lot of the careers that advance more quickly, like the rogue, like the fighter, and that sort of thing within the game frame. The fact that the magic user generally early on is the toughest one to advance, it gets a little bit easier in some of the middle levels, then it gets harder again. Those types of things got me thinking, actually, it could work, because it might actually do something pretty unique, and you'll have to bear with me. So I'll give you an example. If we just flick open the book, and I haven't prepared it, so I do apologise, but the fighter's career experience points, as per the original AD&D, he would need 2,000 XP to go from first level to second. He would then need another 2 to go from second to third, and then he'd need 4 to go from third to eighth. So it's 8,000 to get to fourth. Now, if we take, say, for example, a paladin would need 12,000 to go to fourth. Now, if you think about Pathfinder paladins, they're a much different beast now, and that just seems right to me. There's something in that. You then look at, say, magic users to get to fourth level need 10,000. Yeah, it's a tough start for them. But then that does seem actually quite fair, because it is quite well balanced. And the other thing I noticed when I looked at this, and I realised they had illusionists in here, which of course is different now. We have specialists, spellcasters, so you could lump the specialists under that column. Specialists are a little bit easier to develop than a straight spellcaster, because obviously they give up something. So that seems to work, and it would again be easy to put in with a specialist, something like a sorcerer experience points quite easily. So I could sort of see where his mind was going with this. Now, there are issues, of course. I mean, if you take the druid only has up to 14th level and is a different animal than it currently is in the format of Pathfinder. There would need to be some thought process around it. The monk worked differently in the original D&D, but again, I'm not too adverse to that. I think, again, it's pretty close. It's not that million miles off where I where I think it could be. So there's definitely something in it, and I got thinking about it in so many ways, and I thought, I'm really tempted to try this out because it just seems like it could actually work. We've got so preoccupied, I personally have, I've got really preoccupied with the balance word, and I've forgotten something really fundamental here. When we first started out, this book particularly, was it balanced? No. Was it fair? No. Did my players mind? No. Did I care? No, not really. Did I mind that it wasn't balanced? No. But this opens up opportunity. The beautiful thing about a role-play game is it's not a mirror of life, is it? It's an escapism. It's a hobby. It's meant to be fun. But by changing up the experience points, I think what this could do, it could bring back some of the fun to the table because some of the careers that don't get played a lot would now be have more potential to be used because the experience points to enter them are different. So for example, the Bard would be different because the way it could work in this, because you could go back to an older school format of how the Bards used to work and still play it in a Pathfinder way. I'm pretty confident that could be done. And bring back the Bard to be something as it should be, which it currently has lost. The Magic users should be, they get as many advantages that quite rightly people have pointed out don't scale well. As the levels move on, they seem to get a little bit further ahead, and Pathfinder hasn't cured that problem at high level, I don't believe. Offset it, but hasn't cured it. So this could be a way, with some community support, for an idea that could really work. And I'm seriously tempted to have a think about it and try to make this work and give it a shot in Pathfinder for lots of different reasons. And I was going to say as a final point to this, that I actually think as well that multi-classing opens up under Pathfinder, which it currently doesn't, because some careers now would be less expensive, so thieves. So there is a reason why a fighter could specialise in multi-classing between the two, because it wouldn't be too difficult to run two separate classes as opposed to what we've currently got, that literally the levels are adding on top of each other, whereas before they didn't. So there is definitely some mileage, there's more thought process that's got to go into it, and I appreciate this is just my initial thoughts. I would love to see some responses to this. I'd love to see some video responses to what people think. Is it something that would interest you? Is it something you think, yeah, you know what, that guy's onto something? That's really interesting. I wonder what would happen if. What are your thoughts around what if? What happens when you do it? Would it be ridiculous? Could it not work? Interesting idea though, whatever way you look at it, and we'd be fascinated to have your responses on it, and I know he will be. So that's the community question this week. Let me just tap this. And now it brings me nicely on to this week's review, a random review. Now this particular random review I've taken from a very dear friend of mine who's been a subscriber since the beginning and asked me to do a review on the original AD&D. Has a lot of memories of it. I wanted me to review it. Now I'm not going to review this in a traditional sense. I think most of the people on here understand what Dungeons and Dragons is, what the classes were, what the races are, etc. So really, what am I going to talk about? So I suppose really the reality is what this means to me, I suppose, as a review. These books are what role-playing games, in my view, stem from now. Fantasy ones stem from this book. They are almost like the mini Bibles, if you like, the RPG Bibles of their time, where they gave us the tools, and since then the game has developed. And the one thing that still stands out to me is that the memories of this game I have are immense. I ran a 7-year game, I ran so many games in this, and a lot of it I had to ad-lib myself, a lot of it I had to put in, but I look back on it and I think it was absolutely fantastic. It did things that nothing else in my life has ever done, and for that I'm eternally grateful. These books are not balanced. There are issues in them. There's no doubt about that. There was a lot of grey areas that you as a DM would have to fill in. How can I not score this a perfect 4 though? I'd have to be foolish to not say that these books are that inspirational to me personally. If we said I'm reviewing the rules, I'd probably give them a 2. But I'm reviewing the nostalgia. I'm reviewing what they mean personally to me, and what I believe they mean to a lot of the community. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is a mecca, really, for what synonymous really with high fantasy role-playing games for me. And what can be achieved with pen, paper, some dice, a few friends around a table, and a great story. There's nothing more you can say than that. I had so many wonderful, privileged hours as a DM running this game and thinking about the various ways to utilise these spells, certain spell combinations, different enemy NPCs, different ways to confound, confuse, and interest my players. That there is nothing that I can say about these books right now. It's wonderful looking back and even seeing the stains on some of the pages and how they got there. That means more than anything to me personally. And I look back on some of these things now and I say to myself, well, it was an absolute privilege to have done this, to be involved in this game. I can't really review this one. All I can do is say to people, if you don't own a copy of a player's handbook or an original D&D, whether it be the old red box, whether it be the old black books, which are my personal favourites of the time period, they're not expensive. You probably pick them up on Amazon for about $7-8 a book. Get yourself some brilliant history. There are still charts and tables in both books, which could definitely be valuable to you now. And I know there are a number of companies that are releasing Osric or old style role-play games modelled off these engines that would be fantastic to get hold of. Get hold of some. Have a look at them. They've definitely been instrumental in what I've done in my life. I've got the greatest respect for the whole 3 basic books, the Player's Handbook, the DM's Guide, and the original Monster Manual. Just fun. And there's nothing more than I can really say than that. Just to say it's just been fantastic to spend a couple of minutes wittering on about it, as opposed to actually really reviewing it. It's just something that I found eternally great. I'm very grateful for. These books will always hold a special place for me personally, and I think a number of DMs out there will probably be the same. Anyway, I'm going to bring things to a close there tonight. I want to thank all the new subscribers that we've had to the channel, the RPG Show. I want to see more people trying to click in the comments boxes, get your video responses in where you can, even if it's just about the show in general. Give me your thoughts, give me your feedback. It's critically important. Some of you have been asking about can we reply to your DMs? You know, are you a DM? I'd like to interview your video. Yes, of course, that's what it's there for. It's there permanently. It's there forever. Reply. We want to see you new DMs pop up. It's important that we see you. We'll definitely highlight anybody that bothers to do a video response. There are a number of DMs out there now and video channel RPG gurus who are definitely putting back into their audience something and hoping their audience will give something back. So do. It's important as well. Give your thumbs up where you can. If you don't like what you see, let me know what it is you don't like. Give me the opportunity to correct it and we'll change it. The show's there for you guys and girls. That's your show. I want to develop it your way. I thank you for all the emails. I want to thank everybody for the letters I received this week. It was fantastic getting them. It was brilliant to get all those emails. It's been an absolute privilege this week to send out another show. So thank you very much for your time. I've been Sean Connors. This has been Outsiders. Until the next time, happy gaming and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.